Hi everyone. Okay, so I was sent a request on Patreon. Thank you very much for your pledge, by the way. A request for one of Jordan's videos that I originally skipped. I didn't think it seemed like that much fun, but hey, if that's what you want, I'll see what I can do. So let's listen to Jordan talk about tarot, because of course if it's stupid, he's into it.
As you may be aware, we've been developing a very special spirit science tarot deck called Patch Tarot.
Okay, remember that. This is special tarot. Special tarot. Think about that.
Our understanding is that tarot is a pictographic, card-based diagram of everything in creation, the visible and the invisible, the known and the unknown.
Wow, we're off to a great start. You're already spouting nonsense. First of all, a deck of cards is not a diagram. If you arrange them on a table, for example, they would perhaps constitute a diagram. I guess you could say that, but if you rearrange them, it would be a different diagram. What's the point?
We consider it to be an ancient science rooted in Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and other ancient symbology.
Science. I'll remember you said that.
Tarot actually originated in the world sometime in the 14th century Europe, and herein it was a simple card game fashioned in a make-your-own-adventure style of game. It was not thought of or used as any form of science or thought sequence other than a way for aristocrats to enjoy themselves in their spare time. And yet, sometime after its initial adoption in Europe, a few clever esoteric scholars recognized certain patterns within the tarot that allowed it to be developed in relationship to the established esoteric understandings at that time.
Not quite. The first to assign divinatory meanings to the cards was Jean-Baptiste Alliette in 1783. There's no mention of tarot being used for divination or any other occult purposes prior to 1781, when Court de Gebelin, which I'm probably mispronouncing, pulled some connection between tarot and ancient Egyptian mythology straight out of his ass without any evidence whatsoever. As for how it works, it's actually pretty simple. It's no different than astrology or palm reading. To explain it, consider the evolutionary benefit of recognizing the shadow of a hungry predator being cast on a wall. You see a shadow, which could potentially be something completely harmless, but you recognize the shape and you attribute it with hostile intent and act accordingly. If you're wrong and the shadow is harmless, you might look like an idiot, but if you're right, you've avoided death and can pass on the genes that contributed to making you play it safe. In this sense, instincts that result in false positives are more beneficial than ones that result in false negatives. In other words, humans are primed by evolution to look for recognizable patterns and ascribe intent to them. What does this have to do with tarot? Simple. When you shuffle cards, they are effectively placed in a random order, but we look for patterns in randomness. The cards in a deck, the stars in the sky, the lines on your palm, and so on, and ask, why did fate arrange it this way? What is the intent? What is the universe trying to tell me? Of course, this is just as stupid as asking why a nebula is giving us the finger. It isn't. It just happens to look a certain way when viewed from our vantage point, and we recognize that shape because it has a certain resemblance to an obscene gesture. So there's no intent here. It doesn't mean the universe is pissed at us. The reason why the cards in a tarot deck are in a particular order is simply that they were shuffled in such a way that they ended up in that order. There's nothing more to it. The universe didn't arrange them, fate didn't arrange them, whoever shuffled them did, but without keeping track of them, so they are effectively randomized. There is no intent involved.
In a more geometric sense, these cards are said to depict a flowing toroidal field, showing how the four elements flow and move together through a torus, from singularity to singularity.
Those are some fancy words, buddy. But you clearly don't understand them because you're saying nothing.
To explain this in a more practical sense,
Oh? No, I'm not gonna get my hopes up.
the four elements consist of the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritually creative aspects of yourself. And the fifth element is your soul, the driver of the other four elements, as though they were a vehicle with which the soul may interact and create reality through.
Okay, cool. Everyone got that? The soul creates reality. Okay, what's the soul? How is it different from the mind? You said this was science, Jordan. How do you scientifically distinguish between the soul and the mind? But also, the mind, or the soul, if you will, does not create reality. It creates the perception of reality. That's why those drugs you love work. They affect your mind. Reality affects the mind, not the other way around.
Those who practice with tarot often describe that by learning and understanding them, they expand their consciousness, become more aware of events and circumstances in their lives, and even develop psychic or intuitive abilities.
Buy this thing I'm selling. It'll give you superpowers. Did we establish that this is just an ad for Jordan's special tarot deck?
In a bit of a modern quantum-like sense,
Uh-oh.
we sometimes like to think of it as a blueprint for ascension, which through pattern recognition is downloaded into one's body of consciousness.
What the onk does this have to do with quantum anything?
In Patch Tarot, we have also applied 4 cards to the hidden locations of the Tree of Life, which describe the states of creation mankind cannot comprehend through anything but direct experience.
Okay, those are not even nodes in the graph, which is not a tree either, by the way, because trees don't have cycles in them. But worse than that, if they can only be known through direct experience, then you're admitting that the cards are useless.
These 4 cards are the final section of Patch Tarot, which we have called the Holy Arcana, or simply the God cards.
Shouldn't you call them Emma Watson cards then?
Imagine yourself as someone who could actually be loved by someone like Emma Watson, who is, by all intents and purposes, a divine being. Emma Watson is the embodiment of Christ in woman.
What an idiot.
In the Minor Arcana, we have the 4 elements or suits: wands, cups, swords, and discs, which are also sometimes called pentacles. They represent fire, water, air, and earth, respectively. To break this down further, they are your spiritual or creative will, your emotions, your mind and thoughts, and your physical body.
Why? What links water with emotion, for example? What links air with thought? How the hell can fire be related to creativity? Fire tends to destroy rather than create. I mean, it tends to destroy the things that are on fire, right? I don't get it. But more importantly, you said this was science, so how do you scientifically demonstrate the connection?
Each of these 4 elements can be further understood by looking at the 10 number cards, which sit upon the 10 Sephirot on the Tree of Life.
To be honest, I didn't care before the video started. So in the words of CinemaSins, skip! Stop trying to explain it, Jordan. Here's how it actually works. You can assign any meaning to the cards you want, according to any system you want. It still works according to the same principles. In fact, when I was a kid, I played a particular fantasy RPG, and it had an accessory that came with a set of cards that you could use to make in-game divinations. Of course, they worked because it was a fantasy game. It was set in a world where magic actually worked. Now, the idea was that the DM would work the predictions of the deck into the story, which is, of course, cheating. But I figured that, just for the hell of it, I would see if they worked for real. And guess what? Much to my surprise, they did. I remember the first successful prediction I made had to do with success and greed. My greed will lead to success. The next day at recess, we played soccer and I scored 3 goals by keeping the ball to myself rather than passing. By keeping the ball myself, by being greedy, I was successful. That's exactly what was predicted. Or was it? A few days later, other things happened that, and I can't remember what these things were, but it made me wonder, was this the thing that was predicted or wasn't it? And that called everything else into question as well. I realized that the deck hadn't predicted that I would score 3 goals. It predicted success. So I remembered some detail from the day that would count as success. If I hadn't scored those goals, I might have remembered convincing my mom to make apple pie, beating that boss in whatever video game I was playing at the time, or hell, if nothing else, eating my lunch without choking to death. My point is, the cards said nothing about how successful I would be or at what. thus making the prediction so vague that it was all but guaranteed to come true. It's the same when you look for information about the past or the present. You look for details that match the divination, which is so vague that you are all but guaranteed to find something that matches it. The more vague a divination is, the more possible events there are that could actually match it, fulfill the prophecy, if you will. And that means the likelihood of the deck being right by chance goes up a lot. Now, these successful guesses, because that's what they are, make you think that it works. So you then try to obtain information about the unknown. And that's actually a good idea, because that's how you'd test this scientifically. But you either try to get information about the unknowable, making your predictions unfalsifiable, or you test your predictions without any kind of controls in place, leading to confirmation bias. Turns out, just as with astrology or palm reading, information obtained through card reading is no better than guesswork once you use proper controls, like double-blind protocols. This is why you will never hear of anyone being able to divine a winning lottery number. Now, I suppose you could argue that there's really no harm in guessing based on what a deck tells you by chance, and just pulling something straight out of your ass, but actually I can find two problems with it. One, it can lead to a kind of addiction where people can't make decisions without consulting the cards. What if the cards are not around? Then you can't make decisions. Because you believe that the cards are much better at making decisions than you are, so you become indecisive, not realizing that you are the one making decisions all along. And also, what happens if you're not the one reading the cards? What if you have to pay someone else for that? There's an entire industry based on abusing people with this kind of addiction. And two, idiots like you, Jordan, are claiming that the cards are more than just pretty pictures, and you're charging for them accordingly. That's fraud. Now, I don't know if it would qualify as fraud in the legal sense, because I think if you go to court and say, hey, this deck didn't give me superpowers, they'll just say, okay, it's not Jordan's fault that you're an idiot. But it's still unethical. It's dishonest.
And even develop psychic or intuitive abilities.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Then there is the fifth element, which is entirely different from the four elements we just looked at. These are called the Major Arcana, made up of 22 cards and which are numbered from 0 to 21. They tell a story which you may find all too familiar to Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, and both an ancient and quantum version of it at that. The 22-card story reflects the path of the individual. Most often he is called the Fool, who exists in a state of possibility for anything to happen.
I see you get your information about quantum mechanics from Deepak Chopra. May I instead suggest that you get it from someone who actually took quantum mechanics? Don't you think it's just a little bit strange that no one who has taken quantum mechanics connects it with anything spiritual or mysterious or esoteric or whatever you want to call it? This really is an epic case of Dunning-Kruger here. You have all these people linking quantum mechanics to the mystical, but they know nothing about it, and everyone who knows something about it fails to see the connection. At what point do you realize that quantum mechanics isn't what you've been taught that it is? That you've been lied to? It's really simple. The university level quantum mechanics textbooks are there for you to read. So read them. And when you realize that you don't understand anything because it's just a bunch of math you can't make heads or tails of, then at least you'll know that the field is nothing like what you think it is.
The story reflects that the Fool is the beginning and ending of the story, pure potentiality for all life experiences to happen, and otherwise naive to the life lessons which they are about to experience.
Okay, I see how that sounds superficially similar to quantum mechanics, but it's actually nothing like it.
We actually find ourselves right back where we started, in a point of infinite possibility as to where we could go next.
Except that in quantum mechanics, there's no such thing as infinite possibility. If you look at the spin of an electron, for example, it's up or down. That's very, very finite. Also, events at the quantum scale are not probabilistic because of our lack of knowledge. They're probabilistic because they are undetermined. The cards in the deck are ordered in a particular way. It's not every possible order at the same time. So I guess you could say in quantum mechanics that the electron has the potential to be both up and down, but that's still finite potential. Look, solutions to the Schrödinger equation are always, what's the point? This is why you requested this video, isn't it? You wanted to watch me suffer, you evil, evil bastard.
This is the point of singularity.
No, the singularity in a horn torus is in the exact center.
The journey from the beginning to the end around this toroidal flow.
You know those cards are all in a 2D plane, right? Tori are three-dimensional.
Tarot explains that when our emotions, our bodies, our minds, and our spiritual drive all work together in unison with each other and sing the same song, they allow for a spiritual transformation within. This new state is the complete embodiment of the fifth element, which is a state otherwise known as Christ consciousness.
Jordan, seriously, you've mentioned Christ consciousness plenty of times, but you have never even attempted to explain what it means. I'll make it very simple. Say that I reach Christ consciousness tomorrow, all else being equal. What will I be able to do then that I can't do now? Will I have superpowers? Will I be able to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity? Will I be able to give a Picard speech so compelling that clan members will join BLM protests? Will I be able to see cloaked space Jews? Yeah, I had to make a space Jew joke at some point. Just what the onk is Christ consciousness, and can you demonstrate? No, of course you can't.
So these cards, if anyone's familiar with what an archetype is, it's a sort of universal force or flow. If there's a way for me to communicate with the world, use this set of archetypes to tell me what I need to know right now.
He is so about to own himself.
This is going to be something that is taken by the hand of universe or God or whatever it is that you want to call your sacred thing. And it's using that as a medium through which to divine information to you. That's what divination. You could use stones and just assign meanings to them.
Yep, you're Artem. It has nothing to do with the cards. You just assign arbitrary meaning to patterns and pretend that the universe is trying to tell you something. We're done. See ya.